Do I think the recent explosion in popularity of no-gi competition jiu-jitsu will make gi jiu-jitsu obsolete? That is this week's question of the week. Semper Fortis Jiu-Jitsu. I am al-Aziz, the owner and head instructor of Semper Fortis Jiu-Jitsu here in San Antonio, Texas, and I'm here to tackle this week's question of the week. So it comes from my good friend Isaac. He asked a question in our group if I thought the enormous popularity of the no-gi jiu-jitsu competition circuit through, like Flow Grappling, ADCC, EBI, it's become really, really popular. Fight to Win, like the no-gi circuit has just exploded, and it's generated a lot of excitement. And those that know me know that, man, I love training in the gi. I only train in the gi, and if I compete in a no-gi tournament, I just take my gi off and I compete in a no-gi tournament, and that's just the way I roll. So I'm a gi fan. But when it comes to watching Brazilian Jiu Jitsu tournaments, it's much more entertaining from my perspective to watch no gi than it is gi. Watching gi matches can be very boring. They're very tactical, but the gi slows things up. Where no gi is much more explosive. I have found them to be much more likely to get a submission during the match. And so watching no gi matches, especially catching people like Gordon Ryan or Wagner Rocha or Gary Tonin or the Martinez brothers from 10th Planet, Richie and drawing a blank on the other name. But man, super entertaining. So I enjoy watching them. And so I think, I'm very happy for the no-gi community and to see that kind of growth, that entertainment growth. But do I think it will make gi training obsolete? No, not at all. And the reason I say that is, even though watching a no-gi match, I consider it more entertaining and more exciting than watching a gi match. And that's just me personally, But I think a lot of people agree because, the numbers are great, as people tune in to these events. But to me, it's the same argument, for MMA. Watching an MMA fight will always be more entertaining than watching a no-gi jiu-jitsu match or a gi jiu-jitsu match. Vastly more entertaining. And MMA schools never made the strictly jiu-jitsu schools obsolete. And say you take a place like San Antonio, we got roughly 25 schools here in the San Antonio area that teach Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. The majority, I can only think of one or maybe two that are only teaching no-gi. So all the rest of them are running a certain amount of classes. They may not be a certain amount of gi classes. They may not be like me running exclusively gi classes. They may just have a few gi classes, maybe 50-50, maybe 80% gi, 20% no gi. But all the rest of the schools are running gi classes. So the numbers don't bear out that no gi is going to overtake gi and make gi obsolete. Also the demographics. The demographics for gi jiu-jitsu, just from a business perspective, looking at the business demographics, applies to a wider audience than no-gi, and no-gi is going to apply to a wider audience than MMA. If you're training in MMA, you really need to be between the ages of 16, 35, 40 tops. If you're over 40, training MMA, it's like, hey, good luck, bro. But Father Time has passed you. You're not going on to be the UFC champion at 40 years old. And really, should you still be taking head strikes over 40 years old? And everybody has to answer that question individually. But MMA is more exciting than no-gi competition. No-gi competition, probably more exciting than gi competition. But it's not going to replace the gi. Gi schools do well. Even during when we all had to shut down during the pandemic. The first schools to go under were the MMA schools. Like here in town, there was a UFC gym, went under. And the UFC is incredibly popular. And they had a great instructor, a former really high regarded MMA fighter, but they was the first to go under. And you saw that across the nation where like high level MMA fighters running MMA schools, their schools went under. And it's not because they were bad businessmen. It wasn't because of anything negative. It was just MMA applies to a smaller demographic. So they have a smaller student population to pull from than gi jiu-jitsu. And no gi jiu-jitsu is definitely like, a smaller demographic than gi jiu-jitsu. So will more athletes who want to become, whoever could become the next Gordon Ryan or Gary Tonin or Richie Martinez, will more elite athletes gravitate towards no gi than gi? Quite possibly, But will more students all of a sudden make a major shift where gi schools are obsolete? I would say absolutely not. I don't, because the gi schools aren't just preparing people for exciting tournament competitions. There's major self-defense aspect. There's training. So I think gi schools will always do fine, but it depends on the instructor. A person that's not a good businessman won't do fine. A person that is a good businessman will do fine. And just sort of balance that out. So that's my thoughts on no gi, the success of no gi making gi obsolete. I would say no. But I would say, if I had an opportunity, if I wanted to watch a no gi competition or a gi competition, I would much prefer to watch the no gi competitions. Like the ADCC was very exciting. Like, my gosh, watching those guys, they're phenomenal. And the ladies too. Much more entertaining than the gi competitions. But most people that are coming into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu aren't coming in to compete. So if you're a school owner, I would say the gi just has a bigger demographic, and so the gi will always be around, And no gi is growing, and I'm excited for their growth, and I hope they continue to. But that's my answer for this week's question of the week. Got a question for next week? Feel free to fire below. Or, if you got some ideas or insights on what you think about no gi, its explosion and popularity, and whether you think it would adversely affect gi, feel free to comment below. And, we'll all learn. And if you got nothing else to do, subscribe to the channel, and I will try to produce good content for you. All right. Ciao.